Righteous Father, though the world does not know you, I know you, and they know that you have sent me. I have made you known to them and will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?"
As we continue our series in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, if you want to get a head start and get there, I want you to finish a sentence the best you can. I will get right up to the end, and how would you finish? The sentence goes like this: "For this reason, I was born and came into the earth." You fill it in. For this reason, you were born and you came into the earth in order to, what would you fill it in? If you had just to jot that in or say, the reason that I'm on this earth, the reason that I was born, the reason that I'm here at this time in history, the reason that for reasons I don't understand, live at this time with who I am, where I live, what I know is, what would you say? It's kind of tough, isn't it? Let me state it another way. How about this? I was born for this purpose, in order to, what would you say your purpose is? I realize without much time to think, some of you might have a very quick, clear answer, but a lot of you might be going, "Man, that's a big, heavy question. You just dropped it on me." Let me give you a little help here. Jesus actually will answer this question for himself very specifically. And when you see the answer, what you'll realize is there's a lot of instruction about why you're here and why I'm here. Jesus will say, "For this purpose I was born and came into the earth, to testify to the truth." He said the reason he came was to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth, are you ready for this? Listens to me. Now pull out your notes, and I want to do something. Open your notes very quickly. We'll start from the beginning, but I want to move in. I just want you to see graphically the notes. If you just read through John chapter 18, you'd be tempted to think, oh, this is the chapter where Jesus gets arrested and Peter denies him 3 times and then he gets in front of Pilate. And you would be right. But you would miss what John the writer, inspired by the Holy Spirit, has tucked inside this. The climactic message of the whole chapter is exactly this: I was born for this purpose, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And then what you're going to see is we're going to see a list of people who testify. Some courageously and some cowardly. Some truly and some falsely. And what's embedded in this passage, are you ready for this? Is why we do what we do. Why I do what I do. Why you do what you do. And what we're going to see is it'll be determined primarily by one of two words. There's going to be people that will be courageous and will testify to the truth, and there will be people who will be cowardly or cowardice, and they won't testify the truth, and their whole life and their complete trajectory of their future and purpose will be determined by whether they're courageous or whether they're cowardly. Theologian Lyman Abbott put it this way: every life is a march from innocence through temptation to either vice or virtue. And each one of us will make a decision about our destiny. And our destiny will be primarily determined by whether we courageously respond to the truth or cowardly. Now, I don't know about you, but when's the last time you ever heard anyone call another person a coward? Right? I mean, we don't even use those terms anymore. So notice on the front of your notes, let's do a little definitional work so that when we use these words, I want you to get them in your mind and in your heart, and then we're going to go through the passage, and I'm going to show you all the people who testify in different ways, and you'll be very quickly to be able to say, coward, courageous. Are you ready? Courage, the ability to do something that you know is right or good, even though it's dangerous, frightening, or difficult. The synonyms are brave, daring, heroic. An example, someone who acts in accordance with one's beliefs, especially in spite of criticism or even danger. Cowardice, a trait where fear and excessive concern override doing or saying what is right, good, and of help to others or oneself in time of need. Now, there's no joke. These synonyms I got right out of the dictionary. Synonyms: weakling, milksop, namby-pamby. Example, this is very interesting. A person who runs the other direction after seeing a person who needs help. Before we look at Jesus last night and the interviews of different people, I want to do something because some of us don't have a lot of Bible background, and all four Gospels pieced together Jesus last night. John gives us a unique perspective, but what I want to do is just give you here's exactly, I want you in your mind's eye to think, this is what Jesus went through, and these are all the things that happened, and then we'll read right through John 18 and watch different people testify. So Jesus' final night looks like this. It's on a slide up above. First, he's arrested. Next, he's tried before Annas, who's the chief priest's father-in-law. He has a unique relationship. Annas, it's an illegal trial. He'll send him to Caiaphas, who is the actual high priest. And then during this time, Peter denies Jesus. By then, he goes through these trials through the night, and then it's dawn. And the Sanhedrin of the council at dawn will then have a third trial, and they will convict him of blasphemy, and they say he should be killed. And during that time, when Judas learns of that, he goes out and commits suicide. Then they take him to Pilate because the Jews don't have the power to kill under Roman law. And so they bring him to Pilate, and Pilate realizes this is politically not the best thing to do, so I'll see if I can get Herod to do it. So he sends him to Herod. Herod says, I don't want to touch it. He sends him back to Pilate, and then eventually Pilate, as we'll read, condemns him to death. Have you got that? That's his evening. You ready? Open your Bibles now to chapter 18, and let's examine the testimonies. And some of them are by just actions, and others are by words. Chapter 18, verse 1. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed over the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now, Judas, who was betraying him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they were carrying torches and lanterns and weapons. The first person who testifies is Judas. It's a false testimony, and it's a hypocritical one. The other gospel writers say the reason they have lanterns, it's very dark, And it says there's a detachment, a very unique Greek word for detachment. It could be a whole battalion, or it could be a smaller group of 600, but at a minimum, it's 200 soldiers. So there's 200 Roman soldiers along with some officials. Judas is leading, and it's kind of dark, and they've got the lanterns. So his testimony after, how does he respond to the truth in Jesus? He comes to him with Rabboni, which means you are my teacher and my rabbi who I have followed. And then he gives him a greeting of warmth and kisses him so that now the soldiers know who the right person to arrest. He's a betrayer. He doesn't listen to the truth. Jesus, knowing what was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who do you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. He said, "I am he." Notice what happens. Jesus said, and Judas the traitor was standing with them all. And when Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and they fell to the ground. And again he asked them, "Who is it that you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you, I am he," Jesus answered. "If you're looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those that you gave me." It's a very, very interesting passage, and we miss it in the English here. First of all, you'll notice that Jesus went voluntarily. After he was in the garden, they didn't catch him. It says he went out to meet them. Second, he wants to make sure his disciples are safe. And so you see that he gets them off the hook. But 3 times, did you notice the witness of Jesus? "I am he, I am he, I am he." The Greek word is ego eimi. If you would go to Exodus chapter 3, and the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, when you would find God revealing himself to Moses and gives his covenant name, "I am that I am," guess what it is in Greek? Ego eimi. Jesus is saying, "I am that I am. I am Jehovah. I am the Messiah." And when the words come out of his mouth, there's such power that 200 soldiers, bam, flat on their face along with Judas. They all get up, and he says again, "Who are you looking for?" And he repeats it again, and even a third time. The first testimony is a false one. It's Judas, a betrayer, a hypocrite. The second one is the Son of Man. And his testimony is he verbally identifies, it's a powerful one, that he in fact is Jehovah God. We move on. Testimony number 3. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, the word for sword here could literally be like a long fishing knife, and that's probably the case. It could be used for a short sword or a long fishing knife. And notice what Peter does. He drew it, and he struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. And I'm guessing he was not aiming for his ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Now, Peter takes a lot of flack, in the New Testament. He's the big mouth, he's impetuous, he's impulsive, and he's going to deny the Lord a little bit later. But can we just get our arms around what's going on here? He's earlier said, "Lord, I'll die with you." And Jesus said, "You don't really understand what you're talking about." We get all that side, right? But there's 200 soldiers. There's Peter. There's 10 other disciples. And there's Jesus. And we know from the text earlier that all these men now are all in. They believe. The Father sent you. You have the words of eternal life. You're the Messiah. You're fully man, you're fully God. And I don't know what the odds are, but 200 soldiers, 10 guys with no weapons, me with one weapon. Peter said, "I'm all in. I'm going to defend you." It may have been misguided, but it was heroic. It was courageous. It was daring. He was willing to give his life right then and right there. His testimony by his actions was, "I believe there's nothing more important than my relationship with you." And we know Peter was married. So he's laying down his life. And what I want you to observe, he's laying down his life in the presence of Jesus. He's laying down his life after he's seen the power. I mean, can you imagine being one of the disciples? And there's 200 guys and lanterns and all this stuff. And he goes, I am he. Bam, they all fall down. I don't know about you. I've been like, hey, dude, this is good. You know, we're with you, man. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen. But there's great boldness in the presence of God, in the fellowship of other believers, and when you see the power of God's word. Well, the story continues. Open your notes as you can see the outline as we're walking through the story. Jesus has been arrested, and now he's going to go before Annas, who is the father-in-law of the high priest. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him, brought him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be good if one man died for the people. Now, you got to get some background here. Annas is the father-in-law, but he had 5 sons, and this is his son-in-law. When Judaism was rather pure, it was done by a casting of lots, and the high priest was a very important role. It's the person who only had the authority once a year to go into the Holy of Holies. But church, the history here is, this is one of the biggest crooks of all time. Annas basically was in cahoots with the Roman government. He had one of his sons, he bought the high priesthood, so one of his sons, one of the 5 sons, was the high priest, and now it's his son-in-law, but he's the power broker. So the reason they're taking Jesus to Annas is, you know, it's kind of like some of these dictatorships where the guy might step down, but he's really pulling all the strings. This is the power guy. He's very, very wealthy. He's very connected. He's very powerful. And so no matter who the high priest is, this is the guy deeply calling the shots. He was also in charge of a thing called the bazaar. And the bazaar was where all the animals, when you went, you know, people would come for Passover for miles and miles and miles around. So rather than bringing all their own animals, there was you read, you know, in the annals of history, sometimes they would sacrifice, you know, 65, 100,000, 150,000 sheep. Well, what they would do is these people would come from anywhere, and rather than bring their own sheep, they would buy one. Well, he had a monopoly on all the animals, and he would do a surcharge. And so this guy's getting filthy rich and placing his sons and son-in-laws in all these situations. So that's the background. Caiaphas is his son-in-law, and notice there's a testimony. The testimony is, John just mentions, this is the one who said, it's better for one man to die for all the people. And if you remember kind of your gospel history, it came at a time when they were debating about what to do with him. And then the author says, he said this, but as the high priest, it was prophetic. He said it with this in mind. Hey, you know what? Rather than him taking our position and Rome coming down on us, we'll just get rid of him. But in fact, as the high priest, God spoke through him that, in fact, it is better for one man to die because Jesus would die and pay for the sins of all people of all time. A true testimony. The story goes on, and during this time now, Peter, who was willing to die, who chopped off a guy's ear because he missed his head, he supernaturally, one of the other gospel writers tells us that Jesus heals the ear, and we pick up the story in verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus because this disciple was known to the high priest. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside the door. The other disciple who was known to the high priest came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. Surely you are not another of this man's disciples, the girl at the door asked Peter. He replied, I am not. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire that they made to keep warm, and Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. You pick it up in the English, but the phrasing here in the Greek is she's asking a question expecting a negative answer. This happens to us sometimes too. It's like, you're not one of those evangelicals, are you? You're not one of those people that actually really believe in the Bible and that Jesus, was a literal person and raised from the dead, do you? Yeah. And by the way, this is so interesting that God would allow us It's such a God-given book because no one writing a book to start something would ever allow the leaders to look like this. Moments ago, he would take on 200 trained Roman soldiers. And now circumstances have changed, and a servant girl just asked a question. You're certainly not one of his followers, are you? And what's Peter say? He was courageous, and now he's a coward. No, I'm not. We pick up the story. It continues. The high priest begins to question Jesus, verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Now, notice Jesus' focus in his response is going to go back to how openly he testified, how openly he shared and taught. And what he's going to call on them to do is do what? Bring witnesses in who heard my teaching. Let them testify about what's true and what I spoke. When Jesus said this, he said, I've always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews came together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they knew what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby struck him in the face. Is that the way to answer the high priest, he demanded? Now, notice the theme the author keeps bringing up. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him still to be bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Are you catching the drift? Are you catching and realizing there's a series of people, and the issue is, how do they testify to the truth? Are they courageous or are they cowardly? Verse 25, as Simon Peter stood warming himself, he was asked, surely you're not another of his disciples. And he denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. Well, didn't I see you with him in the Olive Garden? Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster crowed as prophesied 3 times. And by the way, the other gospel writers, a little bit more graphic. Peter doesn't just say, no, it wasn't me. He says, blankety blank blank. I don't know the guy. He actually curses and completely disowns any relationship with Jesus. And this is the same guy that was willing to die an hour or 2 or 3 before. The scene shifts now, and verse 38, then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid the ceremonial uncleanness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to take the Passover. So it's okay to have 3 illegal trials. This is the irony of religion, and we have to all look in the mirror. The irony is that they want to make sure they're ceremonially clean to take over the Passover, but they do 3 illegal trials and are going to kill an innocent man because he claimed to be God and love people, raise people from the dead. What are the charges you bring against this man? Pilate says. Well, if he were not a criminal, they replied, we wouldn't have handed him over to you. Pilate said, take him yourself and judge him by your own laws. Well, we have no right to execute anyone, the Jews objected. This happened so that the words of Jesus that had been spoken indicating the kind of death he was going to die would be fulfilled. Pilate went back inside and summoned Jesus and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea, Jesus asked, or did you talk to others about me? Do you think I'm a Jew? Pilate replied. It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it that you have done? Testimony. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place. You're a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, testifying again. You were right in saying, I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What is truth? Pilate asked. And with this, he went out again to the Jews and said, notice it's an examination by a government official. Here's his testimony. I find no basis for a charge against him. But it's your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at this time of year at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion and actually had committed murder. So these guys that don't want to be ceremonially unclean so they can take the Passover want a murderer to get off, an innocent man to die. Do you see? Cowards, courageous. And Jesus testifying to the truth and making this climactic statement about his entire life purpose. And by the way, that is our call, to testify to the truth. What's true about God? What's true about us? What's true about the world? What's true about the future? What a statement. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. I guess despite how gray the world has become, at least according to Jesus, who died and rose from the dead, you're either on the side of truth or you're not. Now, what I want to do, because I think the fact is that all of us are courageous at times and all of us are cowardice at times. And I'd like to dig a little bit to find out why. What made these people do what they did? Because I want to know why I do what I do. I mean, I sort of want to know. Part of me doesn't want to know. But I'll never be courageous if I don't realize there's certain things that are predictors of making you and me cowards in our life. And as our theologian told us, we start in innocence and then we go on a march through temptation and either end up with a life of virtue or one of vice, depending on actually how you respond to the truth. Now, you're going to have to get your fingers ready, and I'm going to ask you to look up a couple passages because I don't want you to hear me say something. I want you to open and look and read and go, oh. Lessons from John 18. Lesson number 1 is a question. What kept Judas and Annas from listening to the truth in Jesus? And the answer is greed. Annas was making a fortune. Judas probably had a lot of mixed motives, but it was for 30 pieces of silver. It's what you could buy a slave for. I'm going to ask you to open your Bibles to Luke chapter 16, because I want you to hear Jesus' actual commentary. Greed's a powerful thing. It's something we all wrestle and struggle with. But Annas and Judas did not listen to the truth because of greed. Have you found it? Luke chapter 16, I'm going to begin at verse 14. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, who were lovers of money, heard all these things that Jesus was teaching, and they ridiculed him. Here's Jesus' response. And he said to them, "You are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your heart. For that which is highly esteemed among men, money, power, position, and stuff that comes with it. That which is highly esteemed among men is detestable in the sight of God." Question that I ask myself and I ask you, is your testimony hindered because it could have implications for your career? Are you less than bold at work? Are you less than upfront? Are you less than verbal? Are you unwilling to be unashamed to be a follower of Christ? Because if you are, that might really hurt your chances for a promotion. Or you might be viewed differently at work. Or the fact of the matter is your life so busy working to make money to finally get to buy a house here or to, you name it, that really you don't have much of a testimony. Your life really isn't very different. Fact is, you have a lot of debt. You have an untamed schedule. Your life is dictated by demands. And you would never call yourself greedy, but the unconscious pursuit of what you think it's required here in the Silicon Valley has, by that pattern, dismissed you as being a person who is identified, loving, holy, caring, different in the best sense of the word, follower of Jesus. It was true of them, and it can be true of us. I've had a chance over the years to hire a few people out of the business world to take very significant positions, and they're so well equipped, especially in the areas that most pastors aren't trained, like Virendra. And this has been a 2 or 3 year conversation with him because I had sensed God working in his life, and he's got kids in college, and chief operating officers in the Silicon Valley make quite a bit more than executive pastors. So my conversations usually start something like, I have an amazing, downwardly mobile opportunity for you. I'm dead serious. And what I want you to know is that I can't probably pay you even close to what you're making. But if God, in fact, is leading and calling you to do this, you will have untold reward. And you will be rich in ways that all the money in the world could never satisfy. Now, I'm not saying at all that you need to come out of the business world. I'm just saying that one of the big things he had to really ask himself is, am I willing to trust God from lots and lots of zeros behind my name and what I've made to be an executive pastor? I have a couple friends in the business world that, a lot of people, we're in the Silicon Valley, if you're really open about your Christianity, you're really bold, there's no upward mobility, God can never, it won't work. Well, ask Kurt Perry that. He's the president of new branding at Google. And in the most loving, winsome way, he is out there. Pat Gelsinger's another very close friend. And on the one hand, you wonder, how does that guy get away with it? He is so bold. Well, I think all the Intel chips, up until, I think, in another year, they've developed another one. Pat developed all the Intel chips. He was like 18, working part-time, and created and designed some of those early chips. The dude is really brilliant, like scary smart. And he was torn because he asked God, he felt like there was a call to be a pastor. And he wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. And he had a very wise pastor give him counsel. Well, what do you think God's calling you to do? And he came to, I'm to be a pastor in the business world. When you talk to him, he'll talk about, I don't know how many thousands of employees. He says, I'm the senior pastor of VMware. Now, the fact that he does really well gives him a pretty good platform. But boy, the moment he makes a mistake, he's living in a very high risk, but gospel high reward world. All I want to say is, greed will make you and me a coward. We will run from the opportunity. We'll be afraid of what people think. Courage is stepping out and being bold, even when it feels dangerous, or you receive criticism, or be viewed as anti-intellectual, or a Bible thumper, or one of those even prejudiced people. The second reason or lesson from John 18 is what kept the religious leaders from listening to the truth in Jesus. And the answer is pride, power, and position. Pride, power, and position. I'd like you, if you will, to open to John chapter 12. Just move back from John 18. John chapter 12. Again, I want you to hear the actual gospel writers. I want you to look at it for yourself. It's easy to just hear someone say it or it comes up on a screen. Because in my heart, I don't want to believe that pride or position or that would make me a coward, but according to Scripture, it does. Verse 42 says, nevertheless, many of the authorities, these are Jewish leaders, Jewish religious leaders, believed in him. But for fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. Anybody concerned about your social standing? Anybody concerned about how you're viewed? Are you sophisticated? Are you intellectual? Anyone really not want to come under some sort of label that you're a Bible-believing, unashamed follower of Jesus? I've met people in the business world where some of what I know, people who really, really walk with God, and I've had people say, I had no idea he was a Christian. I had no idea she was a Christian. Well, I knew that they were a high-integrity person, and I knew they worked hard. There's a lot of people that have high integrity and work hard, but they mortgaged their there was no testimony. There's no testimony. We got almost 8 million people in the greater Bay Area, and less than 5% of them even go to a church, let alone a Bible-believing church. The only way they're going to hear is you and me. And the pride of what people think, or the sense of loss of power or position. My question for you and me, is your testimony hindered because of social pressure and how you're afraid people will look at you? It's one of those take it to God, honest questions. The third lesson is what kept Peter and Pilate from listening to the truth in Jesus. Well, it takes a little historical research with Pilate, and all I will tell you is that he made a handful of bad decisions, and the emperor at the time was dealing with some other things, and he went on sort of a long vacation, and he put one of his commanders in charge of Rome. And this commander, after a season, decided that he was going to try and marry into the royal family, and that made the emperor think, I think he's after my job, so he came back, had him executed. And then anybody that he appointed as an official, he started going through and had them executed. Well, Pilate was one of the guys that was appointed by this guy. And so when the Jews say, hey, anybody who has this king of the Jews is no friend of Caesar's, Pilate's going, you know what, this is easy. I can't handle one bad PR here, because all they have to say is, and the Jews talked to the emperor. It was fear. Peter was afraid. Weird, isn't it? He wasn't afraid when there's 200 soldiers and he's standing next to Jesus, but a servant girl and he's sitting next to him, he's afraid. Moment of truth. Are you one of his followers? Do you follow him? This is like what ISIS people are doing right now around the world. Are you one of his followers? Yes, your head comes off. No, you can go. It's happened historically. This isn't hypothetical stuff. Peter goes, no. He ran. He was a coward. You know the root word, you know where we get our word coward? From the Latin word for tail. It's a picture of when an animal puts its tail between its legs and runs away from a predator of more power. And he was overwhelmed with grief. Final lesson is what empowered Peter to listen to the truth in Jesus initially. I mean, I don't know about you, but those greed, power, position, fear, I get all those. The fear of man is a snare, Proverbs 29:25 says. But blessed is he who trusts in the Lord. At the end of the day, isn't it faith? Do I trust God for my position? Do I trust God with my money? Do I trust God with what people think of me? See, we won't testify unless we're people of faith. And I'm not saying it's easy, but courage is choosing to do or say what we know is right when we are frightened and concerned about what could happen. But this is a positive lesson. What empowered Peter to listen to the truth initially? The answer is Jesus' presence and power. Right? I mean, there's 200 soldiers, but there's Jesus. There's 200 soldiers, but he speaks, they all fall down. There's 200 soldiers, but my bros are here. You know, we're in this together. There's 10 of us here. Not that the 10 are going to win, but isn't it amazing that just with a few people around you, that our faith rubs up against one another, and just doing life in community in a way, we take steps together, and as I hear about what you do and what she does, that it empowers me to step out. And I'm sure you guys think, oh yeah, Chip, you know, that you never have any problems with this. You're a pastor and you're so passionate up here and blah, 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 blah. I was doing the funeral for Teresa's dad, and you know, every culture has their different way of doing it. Imagine Appalachia. I mean, really just Appalachia. I mean, like these places exist in America. This is where we're at. There's this little funeral home, and there's this big open area and a little alcove, and there's a coffin, and it lids up, and there's Fred. You know, not much of him. You know, he got really lost all this weight, but just so for 4 hours, different people are coming in, and there's a dead body there. And I don't know Teresa's family, and we're going to go to the graveside, and her two sisters and their family, and then some other relatives and other people. And so for 4 hours, I'm kind of building relationship and realizing, I felt like a missionary trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I don't know how life works here. And little by little by little, I felt like God was giving me favor, and I was kind of connecting. And then it's time to go to the graveside, and Teresa and her sister said, please, make sure, in our whole family situation, there's a lot of people that don't know the Lord. There's a lot of people that are not on their way to heaven. We need you to really winsomely, really share the gospel. And I remember I went out to the car, and, you know, we're getting ready because, you know, they're putting the body in the thing, and we're going to go to the graveside. And I remember just sitting in the car and thinking, I've met these people. This is so awkward. And I just had this overwhelming sense of fear. And it was like, it's illogical. Like, what are they going to think of me? And, you know, it's really small. Actually, the larger the group, the easier it is to be bold. Give me thousands of people. you know, give me 15 or 17. It's like, there's. And then I went out to the car, and it was like, I can share the gospel, but not really go to where you bring a person to a decision, and, you know, you sort of, And I would have been a coward. And I sat in the car alone, just reviewing my little message, just saying, God, it will not matter what any of these people think of me. This may be the only time ever they hear the gospel clearly. And so I need to share it, and then I need to let them know exactly how to trust Christ, and then I need to give them the opportunity. This is what you need to do today if you never have. I don't think courage is being an amazing person. I think courage is stepping out regardless of your fear. And here's what I would remind you, the power of your testimony. Revelation chapter 12, and I'll put this on the screen, but it's Revelation 12:11, and it's talking about overcoming Satan and spiritual strongholds. And it says, and they overcame him, and in the context, it's Satan. How? What's it say? They overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their life even when faced with death. I want you to know, you telling your story, you openly, God is working all over. You being bold in these next 2 weeks and in the future. God is doing something fresh in our church to fulfill what he wants to do in the world that's been crazy, and he's going to use regular people like us to testify courageously and not be cowards. And it's powerful. But we'll have to take some steps. But here's what I learned. I need to have people support me. And I need to be in an environment where I sense Jesus' presence and his power. And so I want to close because in every movement of God, whether it's in the household, whether it's in a church, God calls men to step up first. And men, this is a call to step up. I want you to watch this as we close.
I decided to join a men's group because I saw the value that it brought into my life as a husband and as a father, and also into the lives of the people around me.
I started listening to Chip, and he hammered this point where real change, real growth doesn't happen unless you're in a community.
And it has started this 4 or 5 year journey of life now doing these men's groups that has been life-changing.
I've been able to be more real with myself, where I am, be real with God and also be real with other men in ways that I thought would actually cause me to be weaker, but I found out that through all that, it actually made me more whole.
As I connected with other men, I became closer to God. I could see the change in my home. I could see the change in my workplace.
You get surrounded in these groups with guys who are in different stages of life. You can figure out a whole lot of things a lot quicker than just trying to trial and error your way through being a husband or a father.
Being a part of this kind of global macro mission to make a difference in men's lives around the world is giving great purpose to my life, and that's exciting.
My name is Kirk Perry, and I'm a volunteer here leading Venture Men's Ministry. And our goal is really simple. We want to build a community of men that's vibrant, that is learning together, that's growing together, that serves together, that prays together, and has fun together. You know, and I was one of those guys, and the reason this is so important to me is this, that I believed what society told me, that guys are supposed to be tough, that they're supposed to keep everything in, that they're not supposed to show their hurts, that they're supposed to pull themselves up by their bootstrap. And that is awful advice for men. The Bible tells us that iron sharpens iron, so must one man sharpen another. And it tells us, and Jesus tells us, that the greatest gift is to lay down your life for your friends. And that's what communities of men do. That's what men who are growing together and learning together do for each other. And I've had so many men in my life who have built into me and helped me grow, have held me accountable, but I've enjoyed doing life with them. And this is such an important thing for us to do as men. I know, because I live this every day. We're caught up in our work and our families and other things we're involved in. We don't take the time to build relationships with other guys that build into us. God has called us to do this. And we've created the new revamped Venture Men's Ministry to do just that. We want to be able to get guys involved in learning, so think of this as small groups and Bible studies, but we also want to get the guys together in natural social settings. And so we're going to be doing things like a man camp. We're going to be getting guys together for Monday Night Football. We're going to have classic car shows, a number of activities, and we'd love for you to get involved in those, but also importantly, we want to be able to invite you. So in your bulletins, if you could just tear off today, even if you've been coming here a long time, the name card, and put your email address on there, your name, and identify yourself as a guy so we can be in contact with you and let you know when these events are going to occur. And again, guys, I would encourage you to do this because we can only grow together as much as we go deep together. And ladies, for those guys in your life that you know need to be involved in this, encourage them to do that. Give them the space to do that. I can tell you from personal experience that as I've gone deeper with guy friends over many years, that my relationship with my wife has gotten better. My impact on my church and my community has gotten stronger. And imagine all of us doing this collectively. So guys, we look forward to getting you involved. We want everybody in this church, and I would encourage every man in this church to do something with other guys that will build into you and you will build into them. Thanks, and look forward to seeing you as part of Venture Men's Ministry.
It is no secret for those of us that are married, our wives are more spiritual than we. It is no secret that in a church, women pray more, love more, care more than we. But it is no secret that as men go, so go a church. Men, jot your name down. Good launching point. We're going to have breakfast. Let us know you're coming. This Easter is really, it's catalytic. The reason you've heard so much about it, it's catalytic toward us testifying and being bold at a new level and trusting God to see hundreds of people come to Christ. This card is an opportunity for you to say, Lord, I'm in. I will do my part. I will be bold with my life, my time, and who I am. Will you stand with me? We're going to sing our dismissal and our prayer, and if you would, if you sing well, sing quickly. Are you ready? I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. That is the mark of a courageous person.